For professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
7:06 on CJAD 800. Welcome to today's Entrepreneur, presented by Fuller Landau, a program about the entrepreneurial spirit that drives Quebec business. My name is Dan Delmar, along with Fuller Landau's Josh Miller. Hey, Josh, how you doing?
Other than the slight jet lag after being away in Hong Kong and that lovely smog-filled Shanghai, pretty good, thanks.
Yes, you were in Hong Kong and Shanghai, too, on the day where it had that record level of pollution.
Worst in 5 years. They even kept their children home.
Oh, my. Before we get into the show, why don't we just talk about that for a second? Tell us about why you go back to Hong Kong. I guess it's pretty much once a year right now.
It's pretty much once a year, and the reality is there's so much great opportunities. It's Hong Kong, but it's really the entire country of China, where the amount of business that can be done, the amount of consumers that are growing from year to year, the high level of regard that they have for Canadians, and the technology and business intelligence that we bring over is actually quite astounding. And Hong Kong itself, because Hong Kong and China, it's two systems in one country. And you have the capitalist and communist all kind of rolled up into the one, which makes the Chinese rather intelligent and rather genius. But really, Hong Kong is one of the freest places in the world, the place in the world that has the freest economy. You can really pretty much do almost anything, and the tax rates are extremely low. So there's so many benefits of doing business in and through Hong Kong. And that's why I go back, and the people are great, and the nightlife isn't so bad, so you get entertained constantly. So no complaints all around.
All right. Well, perhaps our guest this evening has looked at China or will in the future. Let's introduce him. His name is Yvon Roy. He is with Vignoble Morou. Yvon, welcome to today's Entrepreneur.
Pleased to meet you guys.
Now, Vignoble Morou is, of course, a winery. You have a vineyard. First of all, tell us a little bit about Vignoble Morou and how you came to acquire this company.
Well, it's quite a long story. We had planned. Maybe I should say that I've been making wine for quite a long period of time. I started, let's say, 16, 17, doing some wine in my father's garage, and I kept doing wine all my life since. And one of these days, we plan to go back to the country, and we were facing buying a small farm, especially in the Eastern Township. I ended up in Montérégie. That's not in the same area. And my plan was to grow vines in there and make wine for fun. And one of these days, a couple of vineyards were on sale, and I pursued that, went to see them, and finally bought one of the one that were for sale. And I ended up being a winemaker.
What type of wines are you producing?
We're producing red wine, we're producing white wines, we're producing ice wine, and lately we've put on market late harvest.
Now, it certainly takes a serious amount of knowledge to make, I would say, a good wine, but any wine. You've been doing it since you were 16, 17, but when you got into this, did you have that complete knowledge of when to pick the grape, what type of grape you wanted to? I mean, it must be a very detailed process. How did you gain that knowledge?
Well, I had the chance. I bought the vineyard from a guy that was on the board of the l'Association des Vignerons du Québec, and I asked if I had the chance to replace him, and he says, "Well, the worst answer that you can have is no. I'll ask." And he asked, and I was accepted as a member of the board, and we exchanged with the friends and the people that were making wines for a long period of time. And I went back to school because I knew how to make wine. I was buying grapes. I wasn't cultivating it. And I went back to school. I went to University of California for courses. And
correspondence, or you actually traveled?
No, correspondence.
Would have been nicer to travel.
It would. It would, but I could do it at home on my computer. This is what I did, and I still doing some courses.
So let's take a couple of steps back. You found this vineyard that you could buy. Talk to us a little bit about the process of actually buying it. You know, the negotiation, how you even determine the price.
It wasn't easy, because if you were buying a piece of land or a bungalow in Montreal or anywhere in the country, you can find some comparables. But in the province of Quebec, the vineyards were a new business, and there were quite almost none were for sale, and no comparable were available. I had to do it piece by piece, trying to fix a price on the land, on the house, on the equipment, and I had no feeling at all, no price at all for a plant.
And the vendor probably thought his vineyard, his real estate, his vines were probably worth a lot more than perhaps market.
I would say 5 times too much.
Wow. So how did you determine what that real value is, and was it an easy negotiation? Did you use outside people, or you just kind of face to face with this guy and worked it out?
I did it face to face with the guy with the offer and counter offer and so on, and we finally managed to agree on a price at the end. Well, it took 3 months to really close up the deal.
Did you use any outside? I mean, I guess you had to involve some lawyers at some point, and to draft agreements or to figure out, the process of payment or staying on. Was that a difficult
I did it
experience?
all myself. I bought 4 or 5 houses before that. I knew how to deal with that, but I didn't know this trade talk was really
new.
different and new to me.
Did you, in many businesses that entrepreneurs buy, there's also a discussion with the vendor, with the seller, to stay on. There's a transition period so that you get to know other suppliers, you get to know the customers, you get to know the business a little better, and they're able to pass on the information and knowledge. Was that something that you worked out? Did you find that helpful?
Yeah, of course. In the deal, I asked the vendor to stay on with me for a year to answer my questions, transfer the knowledge, give me the recipes. As the way the wine was made in such a way that he was the only one knowing. We had to stay, and he responded to that quite easily.
There's a lot of entrepreneurs, Dan, that have a lot of different experiences in buying a business. And are they calculating? Is it just face-to-face? Is it negotiation? When we come back, we'll hear a little bit about Yvon's background and how he kind of calculates things and plans things quite accurately.
Yvon Roy is our guest of Vignoble Morou on today's Entrepreneur.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
719, welcome back to today's Entrepreneur, inspiring stories from outstanding business people. Dan Delmar and Fuller Landau's Josh Miller with you. And our guest this evening is Yvon Roy of Vignoble Morou. That is a winery in Napierville. And Josh, we're talking about how Yvon got into the business. And Yvon, winemaking was not really, I guess, although you've been doing it for a while, it wasn't your profession. So tell me what your background is and why you decided to make the transition, making your hobby the way that you make a living.
Yeah, I'm an accountant.
My condolences.
No offense.
Sorry, Josh.
Yeah, I'm an accountant. I worked in accounting for a while after university, say for 10 years, and I moved to other companies. Went to Toronto for a couple of years. Came back to Quebec City, where I joined Sears, and I worked my way up at Sears, and after Sears, Eaton's, that ended up as you know. And I had to find another job. I became a general manager of Les Promenades Saint-Bruno, And then I wanted to do something else. I bought a vineyard to make it a little change.
Now, your background gave you some ability to analyze and I guess and don't laugh at my next question, but when you first bought this business, did you create a business plan?
Yes, of course we had to prepare business plans. Banks would require a business plan to lend you some money if you need to. I needed some.
I presume you also do the business plan for yourself to know that it's the right path to take.
Yes, we had to do. I studied the plan as we saw this vineyard for sale. We went to see the place. We visited it, take photos and so on and so forth. Asked my wife to see if she would please her to stay there. Went into contact with the sellers and ask questions, ask the inventory, the equipment they had, everything we needed to really prepare for a price. We had to offer something for the vineyard, and we also had to prepare a plan to see if it was feasible to go in that kind of business. And
so when you mentioned the 3 months of negotiation back and forth, it was really longer than that when you did all your legwork and try and find out the information.
It was a long process. I was walking on very not solid soil. It was totally new to me, even though I've seen quite a few businesses in my life. Vineyard is a business also, but very much different from manufacturing or accounting business.
Did you look back on your business plan after you first drafted it? I mean, what did you think of it? Was it accurate, or were there any things that you felt tweaking afterwards?
Of course, we had to readjust the plan. When you want to buy something and you really want it, you kind of cheat a bit on the revenues, and you cheat a bit on the expenses, and
little optimistic.
Yes, when the reality arrives, but you have to readjust a bit. Sometimes quite a bit.
And of course, that plan that really serves as a basis to go and perhaps get some financing. And when we come back after the break, we'll hear about, I guess, the pluses and minuses of your experience in going to the banks and the government, Financière Agricole, to see how that worked out.
Quite an experience.
Yvon Roy is our guest of Vignoble Morou. That is coming up on today's Entrepreneur 723.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
726, welcome back to today's Entrepreneur. Our guest is Yvon Roy of Vignoble Morou, and I am getting that pronunciation correct. It is Morou, not Morou, which is cod. So Yvon, welcome back. And Josh, we're talking about how Yvon, an accountant, got into this very exciting business, turned his passion into a business, which is something that we hear a lot of on today's Entrepreneur.
And after we were talking about the business plan, I mean, there's certainly, he's buying a vineyard, he's buying equipment. There's got to be some financing that's got to take place. So kind of turn to Yvon and ask him about his experience, I guess, not just like what were your next steps after doing that business plan? You went to see the banks, you went to see perhaps a government agency to help out. Perhaps you can elaborate a little further.
Yeah, during the course of looking for that business and the financing, we heard that we could possibly get some help from La Financière Agricole du Québec, and knock on their doors and ask for their support.
And you had all the backup information. You had your plan. You had details.
Sure, I was.
You went prepared.
I was kind of ready, yes, and they were quite open. They were ready to help me. And what we heard during the process of this financing is that they were just a kind of an agent between our bank and the government. They were kind of guaranteeing the loan if they were a loan, but they were not ready to lend me the money I wanted. I sold my house. I had money enough. I had enough money to buy the vineyard, but I needed some more money. And I wanted to keep some cash flow for the business. As I think, as a good entrepreneur, you need to keep some cash flow to pay the bills at the end of the month. But they were not ready to. They wanted me to put all the money I had from the selling of my house on the business, and they were ready to lend me some more money for the cash flow. I didn't want that. I had the money. I wanted to keep my money, and I wanted a loan for the difference. And we can get a fix on that. And I had to abandon that side of the financing, and I went to La Caisse Populaire, and I had the financing in, I'd say, 5 minutes. Everything was ready.
Were they just? I mean, had they dealt with vineyards before, or were they just open to the entrepreneurial?
Yes, they had. They were afraid of the risk. This is what that's why they were asking so much. And said, look at the plan. The plan is fair enough. You should trust it. And they think it was right, but they were still afraid because, say, 10 years back, the number of vineyards in Quebec was about around 45, 42, 45.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're 125. That's quite a difference. Probably today, if I had to do the same exercise, I would probably get what I would want at that time.
Certainly, the familiarity with the industry that the banks or these institutions have is certainly greater. Just quickly before we get, I guess there's a certain amount of equipment that you had to gain knowledge or you had to go buy, or did the business come with the right equipment, or did you have to invest a little bit more?
No, the business, the guy that started the business did it on its own. He had enough money probably, but he had not invested enough on the equipment side, modernizing the equipment he had, and I had to reinvest bits and pieces at the time for modernizing the equipment and everything we needed to work. When I bought the vineyard, we didn't have a tractor.
So certainly technology and the advances in technologies plays a huge role.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
Welcome back to today's Entrepreneur, a program about the entrepreneurial spirit that drives Quebec business. My name is Dan Delmar, along with Fuller Landau's Josh Miller, and our guest this evening is Yvon Roy of Vignoble Morou, and that is a winery in Napierville. And we're talking about Yvon. He's an accountant by trade, but as many of our favorite entrepreneurs do, left that profession. not that profession.
I thought he was going to say as many accountants do.
That too, but left the profession to follow his passion, which is winemaking, which I think is so interesting. And we'll get into some of the government stuff in a little bit, marketing as well, but let's continue our chat with Yvon.
And I think where we left off was change in technology. We're talking about the equipment that's needed to produce the wines, and the change in technology must be considerable in the last certainly decade that you've owned the winery. Perhaps you can elaborate a little bit on what was then and what's now, and what has changed. What has been the most important process that has changed in that time?
Well, it has changed so much. If you listen or read about wine, you certainly have heard that the wine has almost the same taste everywhere in the world, because technology, computers, and got into that business, and I think nothing is hidden again in the wine business. So you
mean there's no more personal touch or feel to it?
Not much left. Not much left. It's a business of making wine that people like, and like any other business, you have to please the customer, and once you know their taste and their feeling, that you have to make the stuff that they wanted. And wine is no different in that world.
After having a beautiful visit to Napa a couple of months ago, I've learned that one of the most important aspects is knowing when to pick the grape.
Yes.
Knowing when to harvest those vines. Is that computerized as well?
It is. As yes, it is. You can put your seed into a computer, and the computer will tell you if it's ready to pick up. You can put the juice on a machine, and the machine will tell you the acidity level, the sugar level, and if it's not ready yet, they'll probably tell you the number of degree days that you need to make it right. And that's all. That kind of equipment we should try to get to make the wine the right wine for the customer.
Now, earlier you were talking about you gain knowledge just being part of the association, being on the board of the association. Has being part of that group really helped you in your business? I know, and do the members of that group really collaborate and share information?
That's the nice part of our association. We exchange everything, the good things and the bad things also. Not things that you don't want to repeat. That helps avoiding some mistakes that make some money savings as you instead of scrapping a large amount of wine that you probably can save it. Yeah.
So I guess you feel that even though there's competition sitting around the table, there's no real threat of somebody stealing somebody else's thunder, so to speak.
No, I hope everybody knows that the volume of bottles that is sold in Quebec, 200 million bottles per year is sold in Quebec, and the wineries of Quebec are producing a little under 2 million. That's 1/10 of 1%. The market is wide open for us. There's no need to compete with one to the other.
And now let's talk about market. I mean, we alluded to before, Dan, you alluded to, the government has come out with some nice news for Quebec winemakers. Maybe you can elaborate on what that is and how you feel that's going to help your business and the wine community.
The Prime Minister last 2 Fridays ago asked us to assist to a presentation in head office of SEQ, and they were announcing that the SEQ would make more nicer space in their stores as for the customer to see our wines, and they helped us on more money for our bottles. That is the key issue of that announcement, even though it wasn't really phased on that. That was the key part of that.
And when you're a winemaker in Quebec, do you sort of expect some help from government because it seems like a difficult proposition, or do you just sort of go about your business thinking, government won't help me out, and if they do, then all the better?
We don't ask for money. We ask for opening. We need to be able to sell the wine, and as you know, SEQ is a monopoly. We don't have many other ways to sell the wines, and we have to have a larger space, a better space. Say, for example, the Ontario Society. Mm-hmm. And once you get into their stores, what do you see? Ontario wines at the first look, and this is something that we are aiming to.
Where do you currently distribute your wines? Do you distribute? Do you just sell to the private consumer? How can the consumer find wine from Vignoble Morou?
It's hard. It's hard because
so
we're
good.
limited. It's limited in the place where we can sell. We can sell at the vineyard. We can sell at the CQ. We were not there for the reason I explained. We can sell on the public market. We can set on fairs and few restaurants. That's all the space we have available.
So how do you do I guess if we kind of switch to marketing, what's your best form of marketing to get the word out there that your wines are worth buying and drinking?
The way we're doing it is we're going where we can sell. For instance, during the weekend we were at 3 different Christmas fair in the Montreal area, and we see quite a few people. We're selling bottles. We're putting our ads and spreading the word. that's the only thing we have. We don't have enough money to buy publicity on the newspaper, on the radio, on the television, and so on, like the big ones do.
And online marketing, I mean, or social media, have you started that yet?
Yes, we have. Yes, definitely.
Is that something you did on your own, or did you kind of outsource? Did you start this a long time ago, or it's very recent?
We did both. Yes, we did both because it takes some experience, some knowledge to go on that kind of publicity. Yes.
So now you have your vineyard, and I guess you're limited. You have a certain capacity, certainly based on weather and amount of acres that you have. What's plans for the future? Do you think ahead? You've owned this vineyard for a good 10 years. What's next on the list? Where is there expansion plans? Are you happy with where it is? Where does your heart and gut guide you?
Depends who you talk to.
Well, right now we'll ask you.
Yes,
Because I know you also have a partner, but
yes,
we haven't gotten there.
we still have plans. An entrepreneur without plans is not an entrepreneur. We have land available for expansion. Since we have a bit of an opening on the SEQ side, maybe we can enjoy more sales. If we have these sales, we'll plant, because probably when you put a vine into the soil, it takes 4 years before you get some juice for wines. So we have to plan ahead.
Definitely planning ahead, and certainly planning ahead requires people, human resources.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
7:49 on today's Entrepreneur, inspiring stories from outstanding business people. Dan Delmar and Josh Miller with you from Fuller Landau. And joining us as well is Micheline Maillet, HR specialist at Fuller Landau. And of course, Yvon Roy is here from Vignoble Morou. And we're going to talk about firing people.
Well, not just firing, but hiring too, Dan, because it's positive messages, just not negative
That's
ones.
true.
But there's certainly many do's and don'ts, things you should really consider when you're hiring and firing, and who better to ask than Micheline? So as we turn to her, and Micheline, I don't know if you want to start with the do's or the don'ts. I completely leave it up to you.
Okay.
But what kind of words or challenges that entrepreneurs should kind of listen to?
I'd say for hiring, the number one do is do your homework before you begin the recruitment process. I've seen it often where companies they post, like somebody leaves, so they're in a panic, they post the position, they start meeting people, and they realize that it's not exactly what they wanted, and they have to start the whole process over again. So I think thinking a little bit ahead, planning the process out also, in terms of who's going to do the interviews, when, how this is going to go, because that brings me to a don't.
Don't ignore the reference checks. Make sure you really
go through the
background.
process. Exactly. Figure out what your process is going to be. I would say don't, or at least avoid having more than 2 interviews. I find when candidates have to go to a 3rd interview or even sometimes a 4th interview, you have to think that, yes, for certain positions, there might be a lot of candidates on the market, but if you want to get those great candidates, they're probably getting multiple offers, or they're actively searching. So you really want to jump on the person as quickly as you can. And sometimes by delaying your process, the person will have accepted something else.
Does that depend on the level of person you're hiring?
It does. I mean, I'd say the higher the level, generally, the longer the interviews are going to go. But I'd say even at a higher level, if you're getting to a 3rd interview, you should probably have an offer ready, assuming the meeting goes well, to start discussing an offer at that meeting. Yeah. Another do is in the interview, actual face-to-face interview. Actually, I'll say a don't. Don't spend the whole time talking about yourself.
The interviewer, you mean?
Yes, the interviewer, because I've seen a lot of interviews, again, where the person talks about themselves for 45 minutes, what they've done, how they've grown the company.
Ego takes over.
Yeah, and then the candidate talks for the last 5 minutes, and they say, I love that person. Because often people tend to really like somebody after a conversation where they've done most of the talking. So they might leave with a very good impression, but with very little actual knowledge on the candidate. So really a do would be to ask questions based on the person's past experience. So get them to give examples, not just, do you have initiative? It's easy. Yes. Everybody's going to say, yes, I have lots of initiative. But ask them, for example, give me an example of a time when you showed initiative at your last job. So actually getting something a little bit more concrete.
What about should you give the employee or the candidate a test?
For certain positions, a test could be good. Some people even do psychometric tests. That's why when you're planning the process, see what it is that you want to do. I definitely recommend doing reference checks just to see if the person really worked where they said they worked and everything. So kind of some fact checking. And then depending on the type of position, you could look at doing criminal check, different testing, and so on.
What about social media checks? Becoming more and more commonplace, I guess.
Yes. Well, I always say candidates should be very leery of what they're posting online, search themselves a little bit before to see what shows up on them. Because yes, definitely employers are looking more and more online, and anything that's public knowledge is public knowledge.
And certainly there are some questions you need to technically legally avoid when you're in an interview.
Yes, definitely. So don't ask if they have children. Ask if they're planning on having children anytime soon.
Ooh.
Don't ask what religion
Dan,
they are.
don't ask them if they want to go out with you.
No.
Yeah.
Hey, come on now.
And don't ask what country they're from. Those are some of the more common ones that I've heard in interviews. Often they're asked because they just want to know, is the person going to be able to work overtime? Are they available to work Friday afternoons? So you're better off saying, this is the schedule. Is this okay with you? There's going to be lots of overtime. Is that okay with you? That type of question, instead of, do you have to pick your kids up at daycare at 5 o'clock?
Things to avoid. And when we come back from the break, we're going to talk about do's and don'ts of firing on the flip side of that coin.
Today's Entrepreneur on CJAD 800.
For professional advice with a personal touch, consult Fuller Landau, Chartered Accountants and Business Advisors. Click on flmontreal.com.
Welcome back. Our guest this evening, Yvon Roy of Vignoble Morou, and we also bring in Micheline Maillet talking about HR and more specifically hiring and firing. And yes, when you can't go around asking people if they're going to have a baby, or you can't ask them what country they're from. Many do's and many don'ts on that list.
And those are from the hiring standpoint. The flip side of the coin is, well, what should or shouldn't you do when you're letting somebody go? Micheline?
I'd say a major don't is don't act too quickly. Sometimes when something happens, entrepreneurs or managers can act a little bit impulsively and maybe decide to fire somebody on the spot without getting more information, and that's something that can come back and bite you later. So you're better off taking 24 hours. I mean, depending what it is, obviously, but you're better off taking a little bit of time to calm down, reflect on it, consult somebody if necessary, because in the end it could be very expensive.
Yeah, I mean, if they just stole $100,000, then by all means let them go right away.
Yeah.
But if it's a he said, she said, and you're not sure, but it kind of ticked you off, take a 24-hour breath.
Yeah, definitely. I'd say a major do is always be respectful. I think that's a major thing. I mean, you have to think you're letting the person go. It's not easy for the person letting the person go, but it's a million times harder for the person who's being let go. So always make sure to do it with the greatest respect possible towards the person. Make sure they are able to leave with their dignity. Yeah.
Respect, yeah. Although some entrepreneurs certainly go by their gut, and if they've really ticked him off or ticked her off, it's like, do I really care?
Yeah, definitely. I'd say another major do is have a witness present when you're doing it. You're better off than being two in the room than one-on-one, because then it becomes, again, he said, she said in terms of what the discussion was. And definitely always have it in writing. It's actually a legal obligation to, if you're going to terminate somebody, that you do it in writing, but some people still will just do it verbally, which again can cause major problems after.
Would you say even building up to, I know you would say this, even building up to the termination or the letting somebody go, documentation is huge?
Yeah, exactly. That kind of comes back to don't act too quickly. Maybe it's something, maybe the person did something that's more in line with a disciplinary measure than actually firing them. So, but in the heat of the moment, you might be very upset by what happened. So you're not really, reflecting really on what it is and how bad it really was in the grand scheme of things.
Anything else from a firing standpoint? Having a checklist, make sure you cover all bases at the very moment instead of realizing you missed something out afterwards. Yeah,
I'd say in companies that are more structured, they'll have like more of a policy or procedure in place. And I mean, also, you have to be careful. A lot of companies also, they'll say they're laying off somebody when they're really firing them. You have to be very careful, because if you're planning on replacing that person, you can't tell them the position's abolished and then post it, on the internet a week later, because again, you can get yourself in trouble that way.
And finally, the one piece of advice, Yvon Roy, for today's entrepreneur, what do you think?
Well, you have to work. Being an entrepreneur is a challenge, a daily challenge, a monthly challenge. It's always a challenge. Competition is there. You have to be on your toes all the time.
Thank Thank you very much, Yvon Roy of Vignoble Morou, and of course, Micheline Maillet talking about HR with Fuller Landau. Josh, next week is our last show of 2013.
Correct.
And we're going to deal with one-person operations.
We are. We have two people that have been actually in the food creation distribution business. Felix Norton, Michael Eskenazi, who we've had on the show before, and Bob Schustak of Danvin. And we're going to see they both operate currently, out of their home and doing it all on their own, gained a ton of knowledge. But let's see what the challenges are for them next week.
Excellent. Today's Entrepreneur on CJAD, Mondays at 7 p.m. The Exchange is next. It's 8 o'clock.